Hello and welcome to another intensivecarehotline.com podcast. At Intensive Care Hotline, we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. Today, I have some very special guests on my podcast. I've got a family of four here with Ariana, Jenny, Joseph, and Bernard. Welcome to all of you. And thank you so much for joining me on this call. I really appreciate it. Ariana, you had reached out to me last year. I think it was in January or February in 2022, that your dad, Joe, was in ICU, and it was a very difficult situation for you and for your dad. Can you share more about what exactly happened during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that is right. January of last year, we received an unfortunate call that Dad had quite a big fall at work. Workplace injuries, unfortunately, can touch all of us. And as a result of that, had sustained a traumatic brain injury. So it was quite a critical situation at that point in time. And so he was rushed to hospital, and that's where the journey really began in terms of getting him treated initially, which consisted of a craniotomy, a piece of the skull needing to be removed so the brain could swell if it needed to, because it was quite a big injury. And then, as you said, Patrick, that was sort of the journey into ICU care, intensive critical care, because obviously he was in quite a bad way and there were multiple injuries that were sustained in the body in addition to his head trauma.
Okay, and initially, what prognosis did the ICU team share with you? What did that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, look, it was quite an interesting experience, new to all of us. I'd never had any dealings with sort of the hospital system to that degree. And I'd say that the prognosis was quite grim, which when you're in quite a vulnerable situation like that, and it's your loved one that's, in critical care, there are a lot of, experiencing a lot of emotions. There's a lot going on for each member in the family. And so it was unfortunately quite a grim prognosis. And we did sort of, hit a situation which was where we initially met, and I did sort of seek you out and was grateful to find that there was a service to support, families around advocacy and making informed decisions around somebody's care. But unfortunately, probably over the span of like 24 hours, grim went to an end of life conversation, which was quite a confronting experience for all of us in that moment, and brought up a lot of questions in terms of what that meant, what to do next. You were playing with time at that point, and so it's quite it's like a pressure cooker situation, I'd say.
Especially, it's a pressure cooker situation if you don't know any better. When families contact us and they say, oh, we're dealing with an end of life situation, I straight away say, well, are you sure? Most patients in intensive care survive. The statistics say about 90% of patients in intensive care survive. So the first question that I usually have, why should your family member be the 1 out of 10 that doesn't survive? And it's really important that families have perspective in situations like that, which I hope I could give you at the time. I believe that the next thing we talked about then was a tracheostomy, which you had no idea really what it meant, but that could be a way forward. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, and unfortunately there were some ways I think that it all unfolded that, again, it was really sort of difficult to feel like you were making an informed decision. And I think collectively we had a gut feeling that there perhaps was more that could be done, and things kind of we were still quite hopeful that things weren't as dire as they were looking. And I think that's, if for anyone else that might find themselves in a situation like this or similar to this that's listening, it's just really taking a breath and taking some time to see what resources there are around you to really make an informed decision and not have that as your sole point of information in terms of what you do. And for us at the time, another issue was sort of not being asked around the person's values and what's sort of important for them around being able to advocate for their care. And obviously Dad for quite a while was in an induced coma, so not able to kind of advocate for himself. And so it was kind of this tug of war of really being able to put forward to them that he's the type of person that would kind of want to pursue every option that's available in order to sustain his life. And for somebody else that might be different, but I think it's important to be able to honor, for us it was to be able to honor what that person wants. And so that's where working with you and being able to kind of, have that support and insight, we were able to have a conversation that wasn't put forward by the hospital, unfortunately, around doing a tracheostomy, which in my opinion and my lived experience in that moment, I think it really did help Dad's situation, and one of perhaps the biggest turning points to having him sit here with us today and be able to do this.
Do you think that if you had not advocated for your dad, they would have terminated life support? I mean, I certainly was under that impression when you first contacted me. I was certainly, I understood the gravity of the situation straight away, in terms of having seen this unfortunately over and over again, that if you don't step in with your own insights and say, hey, hang on a second, what about we do a tracheostomy and prolong life and give him a chance, it could have been a very, very sad outcome. And it's really sad to see how intensive care units pressure families, and if they don't know any better, it simply costs lives.
Absolutely. And there are, I think, key questions, that it was a big learning curve for us in the moment. But again, in consultation with you, the conversations like the tracheostomy, being able to clarify whether a do not resuscitate, a DNR, has been put on the patient, which hospitals do have a right to do, but they need to be inform the family that that's the case. And in our situation, it wasn't until I asked that was sort of conveyed forward. So it's these key moments that can really change the trajectory of what's going to happen next for somebody. And again, really just around being able to feel like you're making an informed decision and advocate for, your loved one, because you'd want the best for them, or the very best that can happen in that situation. Even if that is an end of life conversation, it's really making sure that that's the appropriate conversation to have at the time, and that there aren't other options that are still on the table.
And clearly, given that we're all sitting here today, it wasn't an appropriate conversation to have. That to me is really the take-home message here. That unfortunately, I'm dealing with many, or we as an organization deal with many similar clients, and with very similar situations that you came to us with, and and every time we're trying to put the brakes on and say, hang on a second. Have they done this? Have they done that? Why are they so pushy, for end of life? What's the hurry? What is the hurry about end of life in an ICU?
Yes.
How do you remember how many days they had this? How many days into ICU admission they had that conversation with you?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was for what felt to me the level of injury and perhaps the time needed to see this through and healing. It was, I felt, quite a premature conversation, and it would have been maybe even under a week into ICU care. Too early to tell.
Too early. It's interesting that you say that, from an ICU perspective, having someone there for a week or two can feel very long for the ICU, depending on, what they've got going on. Do they need beds? Do they have staff? All of the insights that I have. But yet for you, And for your family, a week in ICU is nothing. Why would you give up after a week in ICU?
Yes, absolutely. And anything from, coming out of an induced coma, that and sort of other things that needed to happen. It's important for people to know that everybody's journey is going to be really unique. I might need 24 hours to come out of an induced coma. You might take 72 hours, and so again, giving the situation breathing room and time, and continuing to monitor, making sure treatment is still ongoing, gives the person the very best chance to come out of that situation and move to the next stage of their recovery. And yes, when they're unfortunately coming into contact with other bureaucratic issues, you start to kind of feel like you're under a lot of pressure, and that there's a bit of a, perhaps at times, power dynamic. And it's just important to be aware of that, so you can stay in your power to feel that you've done what you can to support the person that you care about, and sort of not regret perhaps decisions that you felt pressured to make later on.
Yeah. And you felt that pressure at the time from the ICU?
Yeah, I think we all did. I don't know, Bernie, if you'd want to add anything on that front, but yes, we did. There were several instances where you get a bit of a gut feeling that something's not quite right.
Yeah, I'll tend to agree with that. And I think one kind of moment that gets to the forefront of my mind is when I think it was initially the first or second meeting we were called in with the staff there, and them basically, giving us the grim prognosis. And I remember all three of us specifically saying, obviously, Dad's not here to advocate for himself. You guys don't know him on the level that we do, and we think it wouldn't be just and fair not to give him every fighting opportunity. So we kind of basically put forth the question is, what else can you guys do to help Dad besides just saying, look, we don't think he'll make it? And obviously, I guess that's kind of it's not necessarily justified, but it just, it speaks for itself, given that Dad's here now with us. And we could have easily just been in the mindset of, yep, nothing's going to happen. Let's just, call it. Unfortunately, it's Dad's time, but it definitely wasn't. And we definitely had the belief that it wasn't.
And that is important insight, I mean, whilst I could give you the clinical insights, and I say that to families all the time, I say, what's your gut telling you? What is your gut telling you? And if your gut was telling you something's not right here, it's not our Dad's time, and families need to listen to that, because the clinicians, they look at the clinical side of things, and it's easy for them to say, well, this patient won't make it. How can you verify that? Now, I've looked through the case notes that I documented at the time, and there were certainly a lot of things that were, speaking against your dad surviving. Absolutely. But, that's no reason to give up. That's what an ICU is there for and equipped for, to save lives in those situations. Yeah, when I look at the case notes, I just think, yeah, sure. They had reason to be pessimistic, but I believe they had absolutely no reason to give up, which is what you had to fight for,
Yes.
And the take-home message here again for anyone watching this is, the situation might look grim, and that might be a reality in the moment. But then again, if they can't turn these situations around in ICU, where would they?
Exactly. I'd add to that as well, in kind of concert with what Bernie was saying, that, making sure that you're kind of reframing that narrative of, well, what else can be done? What else can be done? Asking lots of questions, not being afraid to call a meeting and a follow-up meeting if you need to with, the people in charge of your loved one's care, asking to look at data together and asking, well, could you explain to me how you're coming to this conclusion, and what are other ways that we could look at this situation right now? And asking really direct questions, what's, what are you committed to making sure that you are going to maintain treatment for this person, or is there intention to withdraw treatment? So just asking that can really change the power dynamic and the trajectory of where that, decision making might go.
Yeah. And it also goes to show in this situation, I say this to families over and over again, and I've done countless videos about it probably. They're only telling you what they want to tell you, and they're often only telling you half of the story, right? ICU is a highly specialized area, and unless you've worked in it, for a long time, you probably don't even know what to look for. You don't even know what questions to ask, and for someone, coming into this situation like you did at the time, again, you might have thought, oh, well, 7 days in ICU, that's actually a long time. And, other families might have said, oh, yeah, 7 days, that's actually a long time. Well, if that's the end of it, we have to accept that. But, I've seen patients in ICU for months, and yet they recover.
Yeah.
It's all about the narrative. And if you let them create that narrative from day one, you're fighting. If you had bought into that narrative, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
I don't think so. And, for anyone listening, like in our experience, and Patrick, I think that's absolutely right. It could, if you are prepared to, and it's in, it's about honoring what the person wants, you could be prepared to be dealing with it for quite a while. And for us, it was, over a month. So it was quite a long journey. And that's just the intensive care portion of Dad's recovery. There was, further departments then that we had to, watch his recovery go through, and sort of other challenges that popped up there. And, for those that are able to progress past that, there's also rehabilitation. But you're continuing to try and advocate and be really, really informed, and making sure you are trying to get, like you said, more of the story and not sort of just bits and pieces of what might be going on.
And how did you think at the time, sort of when you were pushing back? How do you think that was received by the ICU?
Look, there was, I'd say, pushback initially, but my suggestion would be to push past that, because we did notice a bit of a shift in that power dynamic and a rebalancing of that after, maybe at the first or second meeting. And for those listening, there were several meetings involved that we had to kind of figure out what next and what's going on. But it did change, and it was, and I think that they clued on pretty quickly that, we were asking lots of questions, and it was not going to work perhaps how it might always. And it wasn't perfect, but it certainly became more collaborative than where we started.
Yeah, and if you can move from, what might be confrontation to collaboration, that would be great, for any family watching this. But from memory, Ariana, and when I look through my case notes, once your dad had the tracheostomy, there was still a number of setbacks. It wasn't smooth sailing from that point onwards, was it?
No. There were, several setbacks in his recovery, and perhaps, like, reflecting back on that now, each time that, and that, I think now I've learned that that's just part of the journey. Like, you really have to be prepared for that and understand, like, just see it as a setback, but not as a complete regression and things kind of, heading in, again, that dire situation. It's no journey is linear in terms of recovery. There will be setbacks, and they might be the moments where you're going to unfortunately have to reframe that power dynamic, because it doesn't stop in a way. It's always kind of there in the background. But as long as you are, again, just maintaining that process and being firm, like, we move through those setbacks. And again, he's here today.
Absolutely. Did you feel like when those setbacks happened that they, from memory, I don't think they were trying to push again for withdrawal of life support? What was their response when those setbacks happened? Would you say they were more receptive to what you suggested? Were they more receptive to saying, yep, okay, he's pushed through the first challenges, now he's prepared to... What was the response when those setbacks came?
Look, it got better and better each time. I think like thinking back to sort of the different stages, but the ICU, what you kind of have to be aware of in the ICU is that, you know, doctors work on rotations. And so part of that is that you're going to have to, you know, be dealing with a new set of people that might, you know, be thinking differently. So it's being mindful of that as well. And that's a bit of a variability in terms of how they respond. But in general, it did get better as time progressed. And of course, you've got more working in your favor at that point in time because the person is not in such a critical situation. They're showing some kind of improvement over a period of time. It gets much harder for somebody to argue that end of life conversation as they get a little bit better. So yeah, setbacks are happening, but there's more evidence stacked in your favor that you can use.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that was shocking to me at the time was, you know, your dad is very young.
Yes.
And I was shocked by, you know, basically wanting to end the life for someone so young, and you haven't even tried all options. You know, I was absolutely shocked by that. When I say shocked, again, unfortunately, I've seen this over and over again, but just this ruthless approach to not give it their best shot unless you really had to, you know, you really were fighting for it.
Sure.
The other thing that we spoke about offline, but I think is important that we mention here too, is advanced care planning.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And as you were saying, yes, I think that is one of the biggest things that I would say to anyone. We've had multiple conversations about this, and now we'll have this in place. You know, I'm in my early 30s, Bernie equally in his early 30s, and my parents are, you know, in their late 50s, which for me again is like, you know, that sweet spot in life, very young, you know. But I would encourage everybody to take the time and to spend the money, and it's really not even that much, to get an advanced medical plan in place, have a will in place. Unfortunately, Dad didn't have that in place at the time. And had he had that in place, or for anyone that does, well, you're going to start off on a different foot from the beginning, because that becomes the directive for what happens. And in that, you can very clearly outline what you wish to happen related to your care.
And it's legally binding.
Correct.
It's legally binding. There's no room for negotiation, really. The other question.
One thing, if you find yourself in that situation now and you don't have one in place, what we had to do that was actually helpful, and the turnaround was quite quick once we kind of got onto that, was getting a power of attorney in place through VCAT.
Very important, very important. If you don't have the power of attorney in place, things could get even more messy.
Yes. That's
very
right.
important to have that in place. Another question that just comes to my mind now, from memory, the negativity predominantly came from the ICU team. It wasn't so much the neurosurgeon or the neurologist at the time. Can you elaborate on whether it was predominantly the ICU team that was negative, or was it the whole specialist team as well? Do you remember that?
Look, I'd say, unfortunately, it was a shared sentiment from, I don't know, Bernie, if you recall it differently, but from my memory, it was ICU, and initially the prognosis, even from the neuro department, was quite grim. However, that narrative changed later on, and which was interesting to watch.
Yeah, no, that's great, because sometimes there can be differences in opinion between ICU and the specialist teams.
Yeah.
I've seen that too. That is a dynamic that, you know, we advise families to use in their favor, but that wasn't the case here. But it is a bit of a hint for anyone watching this. There can often be a division in opinion in what the prognosis looks like. And from my experience, it's often ICU that's more pushy than the specialists.
Sure.
Quite frankly, they need the beds.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with that. And, you know, for Dad, because of the nature of his injury, there were actually quite a number of teams that were consulting any one time, like infectious disease was quite heavily involved right the way through, the neurosurgery team, and then of course like the ICU care that was kind of like top to toe of what he needed to recover. And so, and on any given day, there was a lot of information flying around, a lot of teams collaborating. And so even in these meetings, you have, and when, you know, if you do call them, you have to be prepared that you might be sitting with a quite a team of different people, and so it's making sure that you're going in there feeling supported and confident to have, like we said before, a collaborative conversation.
Yeah, this is another very good point, Ariana. You're talking about support in those situations, and it's dreadful for any family. ICUs don't really offer much support from my experience. It's a dreadful situation to be confronted with that potential for end of life, and they just stated matter of fact, the family's whole world could be collapsing, and they just stated as a matter of fact, well, in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever, your family member is going to pass away. Very confrontational, matter of fact, no support. It is really a dreadful situation. It's you can't possibly prepare yourself for something like that.
You can't, but I'm hoping that and our intention for meeting today and speaking about any of this is to, for anyone listening, really instill a sense of hope. And if you do find yourself kind of learning about this beforehand, or you're kind of learning it as you go, have that hope. Yes, you will be sleep deprived. Yes, your world feels like it's collapsing. There is a lot of things that make it difficult for you to think clearly and make the decision that you can best make in that moment, which is really hard to do because it's not just one decision. You could be making multiple decisions in a day, from do we do this surgery, do we not do it, do we put the tracheostomy, do we not. So it's an ongoing decision making situation as well, and it can get very exhausting very quickly.
Yeah, and I guess as much as it's sort of a cliche what I'm saying now, as long as there's life, there's hope.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that, Dad, but we've been able to have, he had the injury when he was 57. He's recently had his 58th birthday, so we've had so much more time together as a family. And is there anything, Dad, you want to say?
Yeah. So all that story is about my very bad injury, what happened on my work side, and unfortunately, all that story I'm not remember nothing because I had very bad injury on my head, and the main injury was on my brain. So maybe 80-90% I'm not remember nothing from all that story because sometimes I talking some stories what is not familiar for about that injury or my family, because I think it was maybe big mess in my my brain, and so a lot of that story is something new for me, and unfortunately I don't remember much.
What do you think now? What do you want to say now?
And now what I have to say is I have to say big thank you for all my family and you, because you make big help for my family. That time when it was critical time for my life, you give him advice what I have to do, because what's happened in that in ICU, everything for my family was new, and they didn't show what have to do, and when you come, I said again, you give him advice what I have to do, and again I I have to say big thank you for you and for my family to do right things for my survive, you know, because if not my family do right things, unfortunately today I will be here, you know. So yeah, that's my story, you know.
I feel, thank you so much. And I feel very humbled to have you all on this podcast today and just sharing this amazing story. You know, a lot of families that we work with, they're not, you know, we have similar situations, but they can't face the trauma again. They could not. And that's, you know, I understand. It's been too traumatic, and I really appreciate you sharing this so openly and really sending what I believe is a message of hope to many, many families out there all over the world that are facing a similar crisis. Help, reach out for help. And, you know, we would never claim that we can save a life. We would never claim that, but we can point you in the right direction and can also remind ICUs directly or indirectly about families' rights, because unfortunately, I also need to say many ICUs, doesn't matter whether it's here in Australia or in the US or in the UK, are trying to walk all over patient or families' rights, and that's just not right. It's just not right. We, you know, it's, yes, I understand the constraints in ICU is under. I get that, worked in there long enough to understand all of that inside out, but we're dealing with people's lives. Imagine what your day would look like today if you weren't here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just reiterating that, you know, have hope, don't give up, and don't feel isolated in the process. Get support wherever you can. You know, even though it might feel like you don't have time, take a bit of time. And, you know, sometimes it's like you said, the goal isn't always to save somebody's life. For us, really, I'd say above that, it was being able to honor, you know, Dad's wishes and values, which is what I'd hope for myself too, if I was not in a place to be able to say what I want and what I need. And for somebody that might be to switch off the machines, but for somebody else, it might be to keep going to the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I also know from experience is families can accept if a life comes to the end, that they can accept that if they see that they've been treated well, that everything has been tried, if that things have been transparent. It's a very different process of compared to saying, well, tomorrow at 3:00, we got to stop everything. You know, families, what they're looking for is really respect. And they're often not getting it because of the constraints that are a reality in the ICU environment. All families want is they want to be heard. That's all they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you know, it's interesting times, I think, in so many industries in the world at the moment. People are tired, people are burnt out. There's, you know, supply demand issues, like you're saying, so many things that unfortunately you do come into contact with in a situation like that. And the context is important, and it does kind of weave into, unfortunately, what you're dealing with at your own individual level. And so just even being mindful of that can make a difference, that you kind of have a bit of awareness of like what's happening around you. Because otherwise you can have your blinkers on and sort of be missing important details.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, thank you so much again. Any final thoughts?
Not for me. I think that we hopefully covered the main things in there, but maybe just one more time, like, you know, have hope, I think would probably be our sentiment. Yeah. And we've got a living example here too, that there's reason to be hopeful. Yes, absolutely. And we're very grateful that that's the case. And it's very life-changing that you appreciate every single moment in a new and a different way. So while it's horrific and difficult, it's there's been so much good actually that's come from this experience for all of us. So
yeah,
that's at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Bernard, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to go one step back to what we're saying. Obviously, yes, there are, if you do have a good family structure and family support around you, but unfortunately, there are instances out there where maybe not all families might align or get along or be there to support each other. And I think having a service such as yours, maybe for someone who's just a single child, or maybe other family members have passed on, there's no contact, to have that support structure there and someone, to provide like a level-headed guidance to them, because it can get very stressful at times. And I know, just speaking through our personal experience, one of us might have been really stressed one day and the other person might have been able to bring a more level-headed, response. If you don't have that support structure at you, there are services such as the ones that you provide, Patrick, that can, I think, be that shining, maybe not the shining light, but just that light of guidance for people. So if anyone's ever hesitant or unsure, I think just always reach out and look for that support. It is there. And, just through personal experience, I would recommend your services, Patrick, because we don't know you. There's no personal association or anything with you. We just came across you, and if I hope no one is ever in our situation or any similar situations, but if they ever are, I would highly recommend, if you need that support, I would highly recommend you reaching out. Thank you.
Joseph and Jenny, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I now try to remember everything and thinking about all that situation, and I think my key for my survive is my family, because they give me support all the time, and they give me some energy, some energy to help me to survive, and everything at the end was for me and for my family was I'm today here. So I think never give up, and all up to the end you have to fight for try to beat everything, and at the end to try to survive. So again, I say thank you for everyone who helped me and give me that energy and everything to survive that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny, did you have any final thoughts?
Actually, I just want to say, send actually message to people, human beings all over the planet. Please find someone like Patrick if you're in situation like us or other person like Patrick, and you're not gonna regret actually trying helping someone. You try, if work it out, okay. If not, you're not gonna feel sorry. But I want to say one more time, thank you, Patrick. You are like part of our family. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything what you did for our family. Thank you.
I feel very honored having you on this call. Feel very honored. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks again. Now, if you have a loved one in intensive care, go to intensivecarehotline.com and call us on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or simply send us an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com. Also, check out our membership for families in intensive care at intensivecaresupport.org. There you have access to me and my team 24 hours a day in the membership area and via email, and we answer all questions intensive care related. And we also provide medical record reviews for patients in intensive care. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're finding this video valuable. Share the video with your friends and families. Click the like button, click the notification bell, and I will talk to you soon, and comment below what questions you have from this video or insights you want to share. Thanks so much again for watching. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com. Take care.